Prior to the start of the season, when I was putting together my Eastern Conference standing predictions for the 24-25 season, I had the Cleveland Cavaliers finishing 4th in the Eastern Conference, which I felt was a generous projection actually, as I thought a team like the Bucks, who most people probably had in their top 3, would actually finish 5th. I wasn't that high in a team like the Cavs, who, while they still were one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, hadn't really shown that much progress from the season prior and barely beat a young, inexperienced Orlando Magic team in the first round of the playoffs that went all the way to 7 games. And before that, when I put out that predictions video a month earlier, I actually came out with a video on the Cavs offseason with the headline, "All in for this?" A team that to me looked like a second round exit at best, and extending all of their core players on pretty sizable contracts, including early max extensions to both Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. This, of course, after they paid Max Strus the prior offseason, where he would be making $16 million per year. In my view, I thought the Cavs were going to regret this, overcommitting to a roster that wasn't a true title contender, nor had the promise of being a true contender in the future, and leaving them very little cap flexibility to make moves on the margins, especially under the restricted environment of the new CBA. But I was wrong, because the Cleveland Cavaliers, not only have they proven to be worthy of being considered legitimate title contenders this season, their overall fit, chemistry, and attention to detail on both ends of the floor have made them one of, if not the most complete team in the NBA, blowing away most NBA fans' expectations. No one, including myself, thought there would be a team that could rival the Boston Celtics. As much as some teams like the Knicks and the Sixers would try to bolster their roster to challenge them as the team to beat, the Celtics were the surefire favorites to come out of the East. And now it's not so sure. Just how good have the Cavs been, and what are their chances of making it out of the East and potentially winning a title for the first time since 2016? Well, let's talk about it. Be sure to subscribe if you like this type of content so you don't miss a video in the future, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, when the Cavs kicked off their insane start to the year, going 15-0, one of the best starts of any team since the 73-9 Warriors, some were still skeptical as to whether or not the Cavs were for real. An impressive run, no question, but there had been a lot of teams over the course of NBA history who have started off a season strong and eventually hit a wall. The place that you really want to be in, of course, is getting hot and having everything clicking at the end of the season just before the playoffs. But the Cavs, despite a weird little back-to-back loss against the Atlanta Hawks, continued to beat up teams, winning the games they're supposed to and beating teams that are considered contenders. And even when we think the Cavs are eventually going to fall back down to earth, they haven't. And the most impressive win to me that really sealed it in my view that this team is for real is that win over the Oklahoma City Thunder, ending the Thunder's own 15-game winning streak in arguably the best and most entertaining game of the season thus far in a back-and-forth battle against two of the top teams in the NBA. Now, some have asked what exactly has changed for the Cavs that has made them so much better than what we saw over the last 2 seasons, when in large part this has been the same roster. Well, it starts with their completely shift in offensive scheme under new head coach Kenny Atkinson. The Cavs, who have always been a great defensive team, top 10 in the league in the last 2 seasons. Last season they were 6th in defensive rating, but where they struggled was with their overall offense. A middle-of-the-pack team on that side of the ball, a fairly slow-paced team that relied heavily on isolation plays from Donovan Mitchell, and a team that was often seeing a lot of one-and-done possessions last season with little ball movement and few second-chance points and opportunities. However, this season, you're seeing a team that looks night and day compared to what they were last year, moving the ball much more effectively, playing with much better pace and speed in transition, less half-court ISO-heavy plays. Pace and space has been the name of the game for the Cavs. And wouldn't you know it, they go from being 18th in the league on offense last season to now the #1 offensive team in the league at 122 points per possessions. They're a top 5 passing team in the NBA. They get up the most field goals in the league and generating the most possessions than any other team, and they're shooting a ridiculous 50% from the field as a team and 40% from 3, ranking, of course, #1 in both of those categories in shooting efficiency. But the biggest thing with the Cavs this season, in just how much their offense has changed for the better, is that there's a clear definition and hierarchy of role, or I guess I should say a lack of hierarchy, which is a good thing. There is no more your turn, my turn when it comes to who's getting their shots up. The guys are playing for each other as a collective unit. Donovan Mitchell no longer needs to go off for 30 points on a nightly basis for this team to win games. He's been much more deferential, picking his spots wisely, and getting his teammates involved. The Cavs have been much more balanced in their scoring across all of their 4 core guys, where not a single player is averaging more than 23 points per game, which is significant because Donovan Mitchell, outside of his rookie season, has always put up more points per game than that in his career. And just when everyone thought, okay, clearly Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell aren't a good fit together, and they're eventually going to have to break these guys up, not so fast, because these two have been a dynamic duo in not only distributing the ball on offense, but also realizing playing off each other gets them much better looks at the basket when defenses are focused on the other when they're playing off the ball. And then, of course, the great thing about their offense is they have 2 excellent front court players as well who can finish inside in the post. But if they don't have a good look on the interior, they can kick it out to their 2 elite 3-point shooters this season in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Now, the Cavs defense has suffered slightly compared to what it was last season, although still top 10 in the NBA at the time of this recording, but that's in large part due to the fact that in most games, they're the team that dictates the tempo. And because they play so fast, which conversely pushes their opponent to play much faster, transition defense is always going to be a little harder than playing man or zone defense in the half court. Still though, still a very solid defensive team. Now the question is, are the Cavs going to be able to sustain this going into the second half of the season? And more importantly, is the regular season success finally going to translate into the postseason? Well, as much as I am finally a believer in the Cavs being a legitimate title contender, there are a few things to consider here. One, as great as the Cavs have been, and believe it or not, they're on pace to win 70 games of the season. As of right now, they've had the easiest strength of schedule to date this season according to basketballreference.com, including playing more home games than any other team in the NBA with the least amount of travel time. That is going to change in the second half of the year, where the Cavs now have the hardest schedule to close out the season and playing a lot of teams out west on the road. The other thing that's been in the Cavs' favor is their health. For the most part, their core 4 has remained healthy throughout the season. Will that hold for the full 82 games? And if 1 or 2 of those 4 guys are out for a significant period of time, will the rest of them be able to keep the team afloat? And then, of course, the playoffs. Will this team be able to replicate what we're seeing in the regular season into the postseason? Because as great as they've been with their fast-paced, up-tempo style of offense, in the playoffs, games slow down a bit. Defenses take things up a notch. And if that happens, will the Cavs revert back to their old ways, some of their old bad habits, where it becomes the Donovan Mitchell show while the rest of the guys stand around and watch? And then for me, I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for this in the comments from Cavs fans, but as great as they are, I still think the Celtics are the team to beat out East. And barring any major injury to the Boston Celtics, I really don't see any team beating them in a 7-game series. I could be wrong, and if that's the case, I will gladly come back on here and admit that I was wrong, just as I've done in this video, and being way off and wrong about the Cleveland Cavaliers and how they would show up this season. I would love to hear what you guys think, though. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.